Hello and welcome to Beyond the Words. My name is Bruno Comba. When we started this podcast, today's guest was actually one of the first people we wanted to invite. I'm pleased we finally managed to align our diaries. She started her career in TRANSCREATION before taking on several marketing roles over the years. Today, she is digital marketing manager for the DACH region, Northern and Eastern Europe at Genesys. Marina Mann, hello and welcome to Beyond the Words.
Hello, thank you for having me. What an introduction.
Marina, as I said in my introduction, you started your career as a TRANSCREATION manager at Hogarth. Can you tell us a bit more about the role of a TRANSCREATION manager, perhaps compared to a more generic translation manager, and how that influenced the rest of your career?
Yeah, I mean, TRANSCREATION, for me, when I started in it, I didn't know what it was. I literally started at Hogarth and thought, okay, first job out of university, what am I going to do? It was very interesting because I've worked on huge clients to start with. I worked on Pfizer, I worked on Hill's Pet Food, Rolex, and various voiceover jobs that I got pulled into, and it was just fascinating. Pfizer for me, I think, was one of the ones that was probably the most diverse. We had ad campaigns, we had web campaigns, we did print, we did video, we did all sorts of things, and for the various Pfizer brands, as you can imagine. So you've got the well-known Viagras of the world, the Champix, Celebrex, all of those that kind of play into it, and all have nuances that you need to know. So I worked on the German side, so I am just Germany, not the DACH region, because we had separate TRANSCREATION managers for that. But I had to learn what TRANSCREATION meant, and I think it was really fascinating to see that actually it's not just the localization of things, but it's making sure that culturally you're very, very correct and appropriate for those brands. So for Viagra is probably the prime example in this. We did a website and we couldn't name it. We had to be so careful with what we were writing and still have, for SEO purposes, for example, the right keywords in there that then kind of attracted the right audience, but without naming any of it. So I think it was probably the most challenging thing, because we had translators at the same time giving us certain keywords, and we tried to figure out whether they were too much to put in on the website, because obviously you don't want to get a website blacklisted either. And it was all those things, and I think that was one of those really big challenges. And working in this team, everyone had the same web pages to localize. We were, I think, a team of about 20. We had different TRANSCREATION managers for different languages, and I think each of us had the same challenges of trying to make this work. And we did ad campaigns then around stuff as well that were printed, so brochures, stuff like that. So it was the sort of thing that you would do in a translation agency, but on top of it, everything that you would do from a marketing perspective if you were in-house as well, because it was obviously full service at that point. And I got pulled into stuff like Rolex, which then was completely different. It was all print ads, and you had all those tennis players that were showing off the watches, and you kind of had to make sure that it was a very appropriate language for it, because obviously it's very different to Pfizer. It was very medical, and you had to have specific translators. Then you have Rolex, which is luxury, and you kind of have to be very careful with that. And then Hill's Pet Food, which couldn't be more different to the other two again. That one I actually did a lot of UKI stuff for. So it was really that the differences you see with each of these brands, and how you kind of have to work with the brand team in-house to see that what you're portraying is right. The same goes for, we did Colgate and Palmolive ads that were voiceovered. So I got pulled to the voiceover department upstairs, and it was always a fascinating day when this happened, because I loved it, and I got to pick a voiceover artist. So there's ads in the mid to 2000s to 2010s or so, where I got to choose the person that did the Colgate ad in Germany, for example. And I go home and I'm like, I did that.
This is me.
But is there some TRANSCREATION that you don't realize that all goes into it?
Yeah, what a shame they don't do credits for adverts. You know, you would have your name in the credits.
And that would be a long list, though, if you think about it.
Fantastic. And after that, so you moved more of a marketing role at Blueprint Partners, so UK-based agency. Is that right?
Yes, I did, but actually I did a master's in between that.
Oh, you
So
did? In international marketing?
Yes, so I was told I didn't need it, but when I was working in agency, and they said, oh, if you want to work marketing, you don't need to. But I actually had deferred a year, my master's in conference interpreting. That's what I wanted to do originally. So life takes you in different directions sometimes than you plan. I only took the job at Hogarth because I wanted to work for a year somewhere in industry with languages, because I was going to do conference interpreting. I deferred because my interview was delayed, and then in the end it kind of just slipped entirely. And the following year, halfway through working at Hogarth, I was told actually the course wasn't going to happen in my language pairs, because obviously being German, I wasn't allowed to do English. Even though I've got bilingual proficiency, they said, no, you have to do German with French, German with Spanish, or German with English. And I didn't want to drop any of those languages was the problem. So in the end, doing international marketing was the choice for me, and finding all these people, because who would have thought when you do a degree in the UK, you would only encounter 2 people from the UK on a course. I mean, it was everybody was foreign, and it was just brilliant. There's all these different cultures, and I think even that spurred me on a bit more for the international side of marketing.
Awesome.
And then I ended up at Blueprint. Pure chance, because my former colleague from Hogarth had worked there. And when I finished my master's, she knew I was looking for a role, and she kind of referred me, and I went for an interview, got the job, and basically took her role because she was moving to Argentina. So it kind of panned out really well in that sense for me. And I took my transcreation side of things to Blueprint, because at Blueprint we were trying to build a partner program for BlackBerry in Germany. Okay. So the whole transcreation side of things and localization kind of transferred to that, because it was exactly the same as I was doing, with a bit added onto it, because I started to learn web builds and writing web design briefs and the like. So it just expanded my knowledge of marketing more and more. What I had learned in theory on the masters, I now got to put into practice at Blueprint and take it that level further. Yeah. And I think it was really, really interesting to see the different clients I work with. It was telecoms, it was automotive clients, and so on. So I got to experience quite a lot of breadth there. And I mean, multitasking is key in agency. Yeah. I think we all know that.
And you know, when I look at what you did at Hogarth, Hogarth, but at Blueprint on your LinkedIn page, there's so many bullet points that and one of them was content management, copywriting, briefing other agencies. Now, we all know the importance of a good brief in copywriting in particular. But could you tell us what the ingredients are, the additional ingredients are for a good multilingual brief?
Being culturally aware, probably number one. Yeah. Because obviously, BlackBerry was a Canadian-based company, so everything that came was from Northern America side, so Canada, and it would have been for the Canadian market to start with. Yeah. So does it all translate the same? Not just physically translate, but as a cultural thing. And with the car brands, it's the same. All of those, do they work in the countries we're trying to sell them? And does the messaging work that we're trying to put out? It's not just images, because obviously you need to think about those, because everything you're portraying, because I ended up working not just across the Germany partner program, but also Asia Pacific. Yeah. Very different ball game, because you're actually having to localize so much more again and work much closer with the local partners there to make sure what you're putting out is actually relevant and appropriate.
Of course, yeah. Culturally appropriate, probably legally appropriate as well.
Exactly.
In a lot of markets, a lot of product. Yeah.
Lots of those issues.
And one of the brands that you worked on is, and I think I quote, luxury supercar company. I think it was a British one. We won't name it. So, you know, you were talking about like brands that you worked on before. So, you know, at Hogarth, like Pfizer, Rolex, like another great brand. How fun was that to work on the international campaign for a supercar company?
It was another level. It really was. It was probably, I think that brand was probably a once in a lifetime opportunity to work on. It was really exciting. I mean, we started on data, which probably most people go, what are you doing? This is not exciting. I love data, but that's kind of how we started. We started on data and the processes around them, dealer networks and so on. But then it was a lot of events as well, and that's where it got really exciting. I mean, we had alpine drives, we had annual balls that were happening, and obviously we're talking like the creme de la creme of people that can afford these cars.
Yes.
And that's a different tone alone in what you're having to address with that. So I think it changed the entire outlook. And for me, I got into it to that brand because of my languages, because they needed someone in the agency who could speak more than just English. And I had languages that they needed. So they said, actually, we'd take you on these events. I had no background in events at the time, and I kind of just went for it and just experienced what it was like to help manage an event. And I mean, I wasn't involved necessarily in all of the planning, later stages maybe, but to start with, it was more being on side, being there with the customers and so on. So it really meant a lot to me to be able to do that, and languages were key.
And you mentioned, so they were interested in you for your languages, and I think you even perform like consecutive and simultaneous interpretation in French and German for an audience of like 350 plus people. Now they must have called you the Swiss Army knife of the agency at Blueprint.
Well, it was quite something, and it did come out of the blue, really. I think one day, one of the founding partners came on to me and said, she's like, would you be up for emceeing in Cologne? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, oh, they're presenting the new car and they need an MC. So we've got nobody to speak, and would you come as an MC? And I said, okay. And I was given the speech in English, and like what I was supposed to say, I translated it all myself and made it so that it sounded like me. And then I flew to Cologne, and I basically stood on stage in front of like 200 people or so, and had like one of the designers of probably the last 2 decades next to me, who designed one of the biggest cars there, and he kind of co-hosted this whole thing with me, and we presented the car. And at the end of it, they came up to me and said, "This was great. We've got this event in Monaco next week. Would you come to that?" and then interpret basically at the same time for the speakers. And I said, okay, I've got a week to get this ready. So I was given, again, the script obviously had changed slightly, and there was a actually English speaking MC already going, and I was basically meant to co-host with him in French. And so I translated the speech for myself, flew out on the Tuesday, met with the client there, we talked everything through. I had also the script sort of what the others were going to say, because it was the engineer and the designer that were there. So it was more consecutive. So it was actually all right. I had some guideline as to what was going to be said. Because obviously French is not my mother tongue. So that was that one. And then we went to the Monte Carlo Beach Club, and I just kind of went, okay. Wow. And it was full of people, and the car had already been craned over the pool and had arrived. Wow. And then 2 minutes before going on stage, someone goes, "Oh, I'd like you to meet Marina Mann. This is Jensen Button." And I was like, "Hi."
Wow.
You know, it's 350 people, A-listers, and God knows who else, Formula One drivers, put me on stage, and it was one of those moments where you just don't think about it, and just go for it, and just look over the people and speak, and that's it. And I mean, I had my little cards and had learned everything by heart, what I was meant to say. And just went for it. It was one of those moments where you just think, oh God, this is never going to happen in my life again. But it was fantastic. It was so exciting, and definitely one I look back on fondly.
Yeah. So when asked how fun was that, I think we've got the answer now. And well, for the I've always been intrigued by the way car manufacturers in general, not just luxury car manufacturers, market their cars internationally, because often the tone is quite different from the tone they employ on their domestic market. So if you take the German car manufacturers, obviously a lot of them are about reliability, and they do play that card on the domestic market, but they seem to like make it even more of a central USP on the international scene, and even like preserving like or keeping taglines such as Vorsprung durch Technik, das Auto for VW. So that sort of reliability for German cars, the frivolousness of the French cars, like in the ads of the Renault Clio in the 90s and the early noughties, like Nicole Papa campaign. So like something much more frivolous, which they didn't do in France for the Renault Clio. And in fact, when people in France saw the German, the UK advertising Renault Clio, they didn't understand. They were like, what is that? Is that how we pictured it? And but basically that was the card played by Renault on the UK market, and it worked very well for them because Renault Clio was a very successful car. Now, going back to the luxury supercar company, when they market this car internationally, do they play the country of origin card?
They do. I think it's a lot about heritage with British cars.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that always gets pushed out, heritage, but as well the sort of prestige that sometimes comes with those cars. And the one thing I have to say, in Germany, it's probably a little downplayed with the heritage and more towards, yes, it's a car and everyone, you have a great car. Whereas in France, you do see that luxury side more. That's where they're pushing for. So when I did the thing in Monaco, I would have said, yes, absolutely, they're pushing, yes, the heritage, but they're definitely pushing the luxury into that more. And you see that, I think, with luxury cars probably more than you do with your regular cars. But it's definitely one that is prevalent with that. And I think you notice it, obviously, as you say, any sort of brand that has a global presence, you have to know what does work in region, what does work culturally, and you can try and shoehorn it into it, but it's not always going to be the right way. And that applies to any sort of industry, vertical, whatever you want to call it. You have to be mindful, especially in markets like Asia, Latin America, where you're going. And I think in the US, it would have been very similarly portrayed to Britain, but it wouldn't necessarily in Asia. In Asia, it would have been, again, much more to the luxury side of things, because you're talking, again, much more affluent sort of people that you're targeting. And it would have been more to what the French side would have been portrayed as. Whereas Germany, I think Germans are funny with cars. I mean, I'm German, I can say that, I feel, but Germans are funny with cars. They love a nice car, but at the same time, they're also like just a car that works, and the reliability aspect that you're mentioning. So I think just pushing for luxury isn't going to work there, and just pushing for, we are a British brand, isn't going to work there. So you have to be more mindful of that. And I think they do play on those sort of nuances culturally, and having lived in different countries helps you fine-tune your brain to that as well. So if you are working in marketing and know a little bit about the other cultures, it's hugely helpful. I think it's one of those things that I think was key in my career, at least. As you say, you become a lot more astute as well, and at looking at these little nuances, and I was thinking, looking at British cars, how they're marketing often. I can see even in the color scheme, it will be different to a Lamborghini, which will be about very flashy colors. We all imagine an orange Lamborghini or a yellow Lamborghini, and then if I take Aston Martin as an example, the colors will be much more in the dark tones, and understated luxury as well. This sort of almost like you think of a British tailor kind of thing. In the way I can see those adverts on international markets. So moving on in your career, you joined, then took like a 180-degree, well, not 180-degree, but a 90-degree turn maybe, going to Global Lingo as global marketing manager, and then global marketing director. Now, what I was, and Global Lingo is a language service provider. What I was really interested in knowing, and I've got the answer myself, being in the business, but what's the added pressure of doing managing a multilingual campaign for a language service provider? It's higher in that sense, but obviously, as you know yourself, but at the same time, I came in, and back then there was no consistent marketing manager around. So there was almost a clean slate. So I could build it from scratch. I think I started by localizing the website in 5 different languages because it was only in English. So
Yeah.
that was step one, because we didn't have a multilingual presence. So for me, that was really important, because we needed to actually get the company seen as multilingual, not just be multilingual from what they offer as services. And I was then able to help build the processes around the various channels that needed to be dealt with on a marketing side of things. Obviously, being already a global company at the time, there was offices in Asia Pacific and also in the US. So we had a presence there, but it was just amplifying that with local events, for example, things like that were relevant to the localization industry. So I think we went to Vegas for one of the events and like did a big US event there, and that kind of helped promote the company in the US. And then there was some local events, I think, in Asia Pacific that the team did out there. So it was just trying to build the foundations for it. I think how long did I spend at Global 3 years, I think, 2 years, 2.5 years. So I helped build the foundation basically, and I think we managed to achieve quite a bit in terms of social as well there. So that was something that was built, and we tried to do it as well multilingually, because obviously it just builds on that. There was only English previously, and if you're trying to sell language services, well, prove to me that you actually know your languages. So I think the pressure was definitely there for getting that across and facilitating them to see that on their side as well.
Yeah, I always say that to translators, when people tell me, yeah, I'm a brilliant, so-and-so translator or whatever. And I just say, well, don't tell me you're funny, tell me a joke. And I think that's very much that, when you're a language service provider, you can tell them, yeah, I'm funny, but it's like, no, I want you to tell me a joke and I'll be the judge of that. So I feel like, when you do a campaign selling your language service, it's very much that.
Exactly.
And then, so coming to your career today, you moved to another marketing role, but this time for Genesys, the customer experience technology specialist, and that's how we met 3 years ago, I think. Again, a different role there, the DACH region, so the German-speaking region, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe. But what I'm interested in is like how all the skills that you acquired transferred to the world of tech marketing.
I think to start with, I think one of the main reasons I was brought on board was also to help with the localization of things. That was one of the key aspects, because there was no process around it on EMEA level. So I worked on that. But I think on the broader level, in terms of the tech marketing side, I think anything from project management to the time management to just understanding the backgrounds of what you need to bring across in tech, because tech, telecoms, that kind of plays together. So a bit of my background from the BlackBerry Samsung days, that helped a lot, because I already knew sort of the industry as a whole. Yes, it's a completely different like niche of it, but it is transferable skills, I think, that I would have gained there. The web development and website design and management side of things, absolutely, it's one of my day-to-day tasks. I do manage the website, I do manage the email side of things. So any of those things I would have picked up in agency. And I think anything I can tell anyone really is agency does set you up for a lot of different tasks, because you have to be a jack of all trades. It's one thing I've learned. It's the one thing I've learned along my way is having worked in agency was one of the biggest like bonuses I've ever had, because it has really shown me all these facets of the marketing job, because you work on 30 plus projects for 5-6 clients. Then you go into corporate, you work for one client and you might have 10 projects, and the pace is a lot slower. So you then can focus a lot more and dig deeper into each of those things. The data side I did for the supercar manufacturer helps me hugely now, because obviously we've got lots of data that we work with at Genesys, and that's kind of what I can dig into, because I've understood it back then and I was able to dissect it. So I can now do the same here. It's all those little nuances that you pick up along the way in previous jobs. So even if you think the job might not have anything to do with what you're going for, it might well have something that you can leverage from a previous role. And I think that's really important to see. And obviously, where you start doesn't mean it's going to be where you end up, because I started in TRANSCREATION and I've ended up in international marketing. So It's not worlds apart, but it's also not that close together.
Yeah, but you're right. You're one of the examples of so many people who successfully transitioned from agency to client side and come with that agency background. And usually agencies hate those people because they're like, I know how it works, so don't serve me your BS, how do our things work in the agency? It's, you're right. It transfers so easily to, well, not so easily, but it transfers very well to the client side. One of the last questions I would like to ask you, and I didn't know that before I checked your background on LinkedIn, is that you also have, I don't know how you find the time, but probably you'll explain. You're also the founder owner of Monse Interior Design. So it sounds very much like it was born out of a passion for creative work. And I think for those people who are watching, they can have an idea of what you create when they see the ceiling above you.
Indeed. No, Monse Interior Design was absolutely a passion. It was basically, as a kid, I wanted to be an interpreter, a translator, do some of the languages, and then I got into art. And then my parents had a house, and my mum always decorated, and there's always those sort of things it just stuck with me, and I got more and more into it, and I thought, well, I either go into languages or I'll go into interior design. I went into languages because I wanted to go and study abroad, and that was the sort of smarter choice because everyone said, well, interior design, what are you going to do with that? And then when I was working at Global Lingo, I took a diploma on the side, so I just did it during like days off or holiday, bank holidays, weekends, whatever you can find. And completed the course basically within 1 year and got a diploma in interior design. And then I thought, well, nobody's offering cool like interior design in language, like nobody's out there doing that. So I thought I'll just do my own. And I started Monse Interior Design and kind of offering multilingual services, if you will, in my 4 key language, not all of my language, but the 4 key ones that I actually am fluent in. So that's kind of what I offer. And when you say, how do you find the time? I do it on the side. I don't do it as a main business.
Yeah.
And I only take small projects here and there, and most of it is done digitally. So I don't, during or just after the pandemic, I would have gone out to people's houses and done stuff still. But it changed. I mean, the pandemic changed everything. So it changed, and I kind of pivoted to a digital approach for it, and offering those services digitally. So you can have a Zoom consultation, for example, which is much easier to accommodate anyway if you think about scheduling. So, but yeah, no, it was absolutely a passion. It's a passion project for me, and it's not one where I'm going, oh yeah, it's my big business. It's my small business that I just have on the side. And maybe it's, they always say, when you make your passion, your actually your business and your sole occupation, sometimes it becomes a bit of a chore and it becomes a job, and maybe it's good to keep it that way, just make it a passion that you can do on the side. Absolutely.
So, and final question, now we're going to be struggling for that because I know that you speak a lot of languages. So German mother tongue, who'd have thought? Because we can't hear even. You must be binational or something. No, you're not.
My parents are both German.
I'm very, very jealous because having lived in the country for over 25 years.
I can tell you that I learned English when I was 4. So my dad had a friend who was an interpreter, and I started learning it then. I had a book, my first 500 words in German and in English. It's basically my first dictionary, if you will. And as a 4-year-old, just going through it, having fun with it. Wow. And that's how I picked it up and kind of just went with it. And obviously, I've lived in the UK now for 18 years. Yeah. It's a long time. And having studied here, I think helps as well. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so German mother tongue, English. Mother tongue.
Bilingual. Let's go with bilingual.
Yeah, exactly. Completely bilingual. You speak French as well. I think you speak Spanish. Is that right? Yes. Anything else?
Both of those were my degrees. So I studied interpreting and translation, French and Spanish. Lived in France, lived in Spain during my time as well. Okay. And then I picked up Portuguese when I was living in France. So I learned Portuguese in France, which is another challenge in itself, from French to Brazilian Portuguese, that is, as well.
Okay.
And then I came back to the UK to finish my degree and studied Italian as well for a year at university, which was taught very differently to languages I taught in Germany, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And then my last one is probably the one that I'm still learning now, and that's Japanese.
And Japanese, wow. And that was going to be my question. If you were going to learn a new language, which one would it be? And it's Japanese. So you didn't choose the easiest one.
No, but it's probably the most interesting one I've ever learned, because I'm not learning it through courses or anything as such. I'm teaching myself.
Wow.
And I basically started by teaching myself hiragana, katakana, and the kanji. But obviously, the kanji is a lot of kanji. So I have probably a small fraction of them that I've learned in the last years. And it's been on and off, because obviously I've got a job, I've got this, I've got that. So I'm learning it on the side. And I do try and incorporate a little bit every day into my day. But yeah, I think podcasts, anything like that, just trying to get some sense of the language into my ears and being able to just understand a little bit and communicate a little bit. I went to Japan a few years ago, and I could get by in terms of asking how much does this cost and understanding how much it was and things like that. So that's basics. And I think I'm still very much a beginner, but I would love to go back and kind of understand a bit more, be able to communicate a bit more. I've got some Japanese friends, so that's for me like one of those things. Love a bit of anime and all that stuff. Who doesn't? And so
I was going to ask. Yeah,
that's kind of the thing. If you like those sort of things, and I bought some manga when I was in Japan, and then obviously you've got something you can also read. Obviously, manga, very different sort of language to your day to day, but it gives you something that you enjoy to then learn with. And I think that's really important, because learning a language just by book is very like boring in a way. So you have to find different ways that make it interesting for you. And I think Japanese is the one that is going to take me a few more years to get to a decent enough level that I'm happy with.
But that's very impressive, the way you do it as well. And I'm sure you'll be very successful at it. And are you planning a trip to Japan as well, for just like to practice a bit? Or
I'd love to go back. I mean, as I say, we've been a few years ago, but I'd love to go back. I mean, it'd be great to just go again and just use what I've learned now over the years since we've been, to see how far I can get with it, really, and just maybe explore a bit of a different season as well. We went for cherry blossom last time, so maybe we go in autumn next time and see a bit more of autumn colors and different regions of Japan, because I mean, you can only cover so much in 3 weeks. There's a limit to how much you can see. Even if you want to see the whole country, you're not going to manage. There's just too many exciting things. And no, I'd absolutely love to go back and just see like my friends again, and see how things are going and what the country has to offer still, other than what we've seen so far.
Marina, thank you so much. It's been really, really nice talking to you, and I'm sure that everyone will have been very impressed by your versatility. I think it's the key word here, how the Swiss Army knife of agencies and companies alike. And thank you very much. Shameful plug from me that we've done a great case study with you and Genesys, which is on our website. We'll put the link in the show notes. But yeah, thank you very much, Marina.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.